Education has existed for centuries, evolving alongside civilizations. From the earliest days of human society, the transmission of knowledge has been a cornerstone of cultural development. As societies grew more complex, so did their methods of education, reflecting the values and needs of the times.
In ancient Greece, education emphasized philosophy, rhetoric, and mathematics, aiming to develop well-rounded citizens. The Greeks believed that a strong mind was as important as a strong body, and their educational system was designed to cultivate both. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the groundwork for Western thought, influencing countless generations.
During the Middle Ages, the church played a dominant role, focusing on religious teachings and scripture. Monasteries became centers of learning, preserving ancient texts and knowledge through turbulent times. Education was primarily for the clergy and the elite, with a strong emphasis on Latin and theological studies.
The Renaissance brought a renewed interest in classical learning and the arts. This period saw the revival of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge coupled with new discoveries in science, art, and literature. Humanism emerged, emphasizing the potential of individuals and the importance of a broad education. However, education was often a privilege reserved for the elite. Wealthy families could afford private tutors and exclusive schools, while the majority of the population remained illiterate. This disparity highlighted the growing need for more inclusive educational opportunities.
It wasn't until the 19th century that the idea of universal education began to take hold. The Industrial Revolution brought about significant social changes, and with it, the realization that an educated workforce was essential for progress. Public schooling systems started to emerge, aiming to provide basic education to all children. This shift was driven by social reformers who believed that education was essential for a just and prosperous society. Figures like Horace Mann in the United States and Robert Owen in the United Kingdom championed the cause of free, compulsory education, arguing that it was a fundamental right and a means to social improvement.
They envisioned a system where everyone, regardless of their background, could access knowledge and opportunity. This vision was revolutionary, challenging long-standing social hierarchies and paving the way for more equitable societies. The push for universal education was not without its challenges, but it marked a significant step forward.
This period marked a turning point in the history of education, setting the stage for the mass schooling systems we see today. The establishment of public schools laid the foundation for modern educational practices, emphasizing standardized curricula and formalized teaching methods. But, as we'll see, the path to universal education took some unexpected turns, influenced by forces with their own agendas. Political, economic, and cultural factors all played a role in shaping the educational landscape, leading to ongoing debates about the purpose and direction of schooling.
The ideals of enlightenment and empowerment often clashed with the realities of industrialization and social control. As factories demanded more workers, education systems sometimes prioritized discipline and obedience over critical thinking and creativity. This tension between education as a tool for liberation and as a means of control continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about schooling.
The 19th century saw the rise of factories and mass production. This era marked a significant transformation in how goods were produced, shifting from handcrafted items to machine-made products. Factories became the backbone of the economy, symbolizing progress and efficiency. This new industrial landscape required a workforce capable of following instructions and performing repetitive tasks. Workers were expected to be punctual, obedient, and capable of handling monotonous jobs. The factory system emphasized uniformity and efficiency, values that soon permeated other aspects of society, including education.
Enter Horace Mann, often called the father of American public education. Mann was a visionary who believed in the power of education to transform society. He saw the potential for schools to instill the same values of discipline and order that were prized in factories. Mann, influenced by the factory model, advocated for a standardized system of education with age-graded classrooms, bells, and strict discipline. He introduced the concept of a structured school day, with specific times for different subjects, much like the regimented schedule of a factory.
This model, while efficient in creating a compliant workforce, also stifled creativity and independent thought. The rigid structure left little room for students to explore their interests or develop unique skills. Instead, they were trained to follow instructions and adhere to a set curriculum. Students were treated like products on an assembly line, expected to conform to a narrow set of standards. The emphasis was on uniformity and predictability, with little regard for individual differences or personal growth.
This system was not designed to nurture individual talents or encourage critical thinking. Instead, it aimed to produce a homogeneous group of individuals who could fit seamlessly into the industrial workforce. The focus was on creating reliable, obedient workers rather than innovative thinkers. Instead, it prioritized obedience and conformity, preparing students for their future roles in the industrial machine. The education system became a tool for social control, ensuring that future generations would be well suited to the demands of an industrialized society.
The impact of this shift is still felt today. Many aspects of modern education still reflect the factory model, with an emphasis on standardization and uniformity. Classrooms are often overcrowded, and teachers are pressured to cover a vast amount of material in a limited time. While universal education was a noble goal, the methods used to achieve it have had lasting consequences. The focus on standardized testing and rigid curricula can stifle creativity and discourage critical thinking. Students are often judged by their ability to memorize and regurgitate information rather than their capacity for original thought. We are left grappling with a system that often prioritizes standardization over individuality and compliance over critical thinking. As we move forward, it is essential to re-evaluate our educational practices and consider how we can create a system that values creativity, critical thinking, and the unique talents of each student. Only then can we truly prepare future generations for the challenges and opportunities of the modern world. Could there be more to the story than simply preparing children for the workforce? When we think about education, we often focus on the idea of equipping young minds with the skills and knowledge they need to succeed in their future careers. But is that all there is to it? Are we missing a deeper, more complex narrative that underpins the very foundation of our education system?
Some argue that the education system was intentionally designed to create a compliant and easily controlled populace. This perspective suggests that the roots of our modern educational practices are deeply intertwined with the needs and desires of those in power during the industrial age. The rigid structure, the emphasis on rote learning, and the focus on obedience and conformity. These elements were not accidental, but rather deliberate choices made to serve specific interests. This argument points to the influence of powerful figures like John D. Rockefeller, who saw education as a means to shape society according to their own interests. Rockefeller, along with other industrialists of his time, had a vision for society that required a certain type of worker, one who was disciplined, reliable, and not prone to questioning authority. Their philanthropic efforts in education were not purely altruistic, but were also strategic moves to mold the workforce to fit their needs.
Rockefeller, a prominent industrialist, famously stated, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." This quote encapsulates a broader philosophy that prioritizes the creation of a labor force over the cultivation of independent, critical thinkers. It reflects a utilitarian approach to education, where the primary goal is to produce individuals who can contribute to the economy in a predictable and controlled manner. This sentiment reflects a belief that an educated populace is not necessarily a desirable one, at least not from the perspective of those in power. An educated individual is more likely to question the status quo, to challenge existing power structures, and to seek out change. For those who benefit from maintaining the current system, this poses a significant threat.
By limiting access to knowledge and critical thinking skills, the masses could be more easily manipulated and controlled. Standardized testing, a focus on memorization, and a lack of emphasis on critical thinking are all tools that can be used to keep the populace in check. When students are taught to follow instructions without question, they are less likely to challenge the systems and structures that govern their lives.
This perspective views education as a tool for social engineering rather than a means of empowerment. It suggests that the true purpose of education is not to enlighten or to liberate, but to control and to conform. This raises important questions about the role of education in our society and the values that underpin it. It raises uncomfortable questions about who benefits from the current system and whether it truly serves the best interests of students. Are we preparing young minds to be active, engaged citizens? Or are we simply training them to fit into predetermined roles? As we reflect on these questions, it becomes clear that the answers are not straightforward. They require us to critically examine the history, the structure, and the underlying motives of our education system. Only then can we begin to envision a future where education truly serves the needs of all students, empowering them to think, to question, and to create a better world. The parallels between the education system and the prison system are striking. Both rely on strict schedules, bells to mark time, and a rigid hierarchical structure.
Students, like inmates, are often denied autonomy and the freedom to pursue their interests. They are subjected to constant surveillance and evaluation, their every move scrutinized and judged.
This environment can foster a sense of powerlessness and alienation. Students may feel like cogs in a machine, their individuality suppressed rather than celebrated. This can lead to disengagement, apathy, and a lack of motivation.
While the comparison may seem extreme, it highlights the need to reevaluate the underlying structures and power dynamics within our education system.
Are we truly preparing students for a life of freedom and self-determination, or are we conditioning them for a life of compliance and conformity?